Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Forum BX257, here to bring you another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review, and today I'll be taking a look at the highly requested fan favorite 1986 Conquest X-30 with its pilot Slipstream. Now, both the Conquest and Slipstream make their first comic book appearance in the old Marvel comic run G.I. Joe issue number 54, and they make their first cartoon appearance in the 1986 season opener, 5-parter Arise Serpentor Arise in Part 1. As you can see, the Conquest is a forward swept design and is actually highly based on the Grumman X-29A, which was a United States Air Force and joint NASA project. Now, despite its rather radical design, it wasn't actually meant to be a contract competitor for the next, government contract, but it was a new technologies demonstrator, which actually did introduce back in 1984 the next generation of heads-up display and laser-guided weaponry. Slipstream himself, he's introduced in the comic books as a bit of a video game wizard, but doesn't have many appearances after that. Nothing substantial anyway. However, in the cartoons, he is actually given his own episode called In the Presence of Mine Enemies. And in that episode, even though he is the primary character in it, and a lot of his personality really does shine, and he's a very interesting and actually nice guy, it is actually well known for the character that he faces off against. One interesting detail is the shark's face detail painted on the nose of the craft. It's an homage to the Flying Tiger Squadron of World War II. Unfortunately, that's in direct contrast to what's on the tail fins, which is this sort of silhouette of the actual jet itself, which is more indicative of an experimental jet or a test jet. I think I would have rather have seen this symbol on maybe Slipstream's arm. I think a US's flag livery would have been actually quite a bit nicer, because this was issued at the same time as the US's flag. It would have been reissued in 1986. One unfortunate downside to that is the arrestor cable tow hook, which came with the US's flag and which fits onto the Sky Striker, does not fit onto the Conquest. That's very odd. The Conquest is about 18.5 inches long by about 13 inches wide at the wingtips. So it's a significant size, and a very good size for a jet, of course. But it was also significantly smaller than the jet it replaced, the 1983 to 1985 Sky Striker. However, the Sky Striker was a much more complex toy than the Conquest was. And as a result, the Conquest was on average about $5 cheaper than the Sky Striker. On top of that, the Conquest design was very sturdy, and there's not a lot of parts you have to worry about being broken on this. The Conquest has manually opening landing gear, so you just pull out the front like so, pull out the back, and the back is actually geared together, so you just pull one out and the other one straightens up automatically. Mine is a bit floppy, and I kind of wish it locked back in an angle like that instead of just drooping down like gravity. The wheels themselves are nice and rubbery and roll really well. On the top, we have an opening hatch which opens this way because the tabs are actually at the back of the thing. And you can see some electronics detail in there. At the back, we have another hatch which opens in the opposite direction because the tabs are at the front. And you can see the engine detail on this one. And on the bottom, we have 4 of these yellow missiles. They just detach via these sort of universal dumbbell holes there, which are fairly common with all G.I. Joe vehicles. as well as these fuel drop tanks. Now, sometimes these are referred to as bombs, but they're fuel drop tanks, really. One thing in particular, I like to display this thing with the drop tanks completely removed and the missiles on the inside like this. It sort of gives it a much more streamlined appearance, I think, than with the drop tanks on the middle there and the missiles all the way out. Of course, you have an opening cockpit, and you can see quite a bit of detail in there. It's a nice chair and all that. It doesn't remove, unfortunately, and it doesn't have a back peg, so when you're putting in a figure, he doesn't really lock in anywhere, so he does kind of tend to flop around. So I've just widened up his arms so he's kind of braced up against the thing so he doesn't wobble around there. As for Slipstream, it's nice that we finally get a fighter pilot in a proper flight suit, as opposed to Ace's 1950s spacesuit inspired getup. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because it did contrast with the sort of real-world F-14 style Sky Striker. So finally we get a very modern-looking military uniform for a pilot who is basically piloting a very futuristic X-29A inspired Conquest. Slipstream doesn't come with any accessories, so he's actually fairly easy and actually kind of common to find on the aftermarket. You shouldn't really have to pay a lot for this fellow. Though I do have to say, check out his nose, because his nose, the paint on his nose is very easy to rub off. That's pretty much the only thing you should really look for. Character-wise, even though the Conquest was supposed to replace the Sky Striker, both of these guys were fairly equally shown in the comic books for a very long time. One wasn't really seemed to be preferred over the other, I would say. And while I did say that he has a much more modern look to his flight suit, I would actually say his helmet is actually World War II inspired, a sort of a leathery kind of a style with the goggles on top. Unfortunately, I don't have the 2008 25th anniversary version to make a proper comparison. Ironically, the 2008 version is a Target exclusive and actually harder to find than the original. But from what I can see in photographs, the canopy connector is a solid square attached to the cockpit fuselage part on the 2008 version, versus my original, which has a bar and claw hinge connection. Also, the tips of the yellow missiles on the 2008 version are rounded off right at the front fins, whereas mine have points sticking out beyond those front fins. As for Slipstream, there is a China-marked variant with slightly lighter paint application and a more prominent grin molded onto his face. I'm not sure when or where these China-marked versions were released. They're probably from the 1988 European release of the Conquest, as I don't recall any mail-away version of Slipstream ever being offered. And if you're looking for the figure on the aftermarket, be sure to try several versions of the name, either 2 words, with or without hyphen, and sellers even sometimes use it as 1 word. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.